What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks into what he believes will be a friendly conversation, only to realize he's being set up for a public takedown on live television? What you're about to hear isn't gossip or exaggeration. It's one of the most volatile confrontations daytime TV has ever seen. A moment where patience snapped and control completely slipped away. Before we dive into the video, take a second to like, subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know what you think really sparked this confrontation. Because opinions on this one are sharply divided. Now let's get back to the video. The studio lights burned bright as Mark Wahlberg settled into his chair on the View set, adjusting his jacket with the calm confidence of someone who had faced countless interviews before. He wasn't there to argue or provoke. He was there to promote his latest film, a deeply emotional story about second chances that critics had been praising across the board. During the commercial break, the atmosphere felt relaxed and professional. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel greeted Mark warmly, exchanging small talk and smiles that suggested a smooth conversation ahead. Everything seemed routine until you noticed Joy Behar. Joy sat at the far end of the table, flipping through her note cards with an intensity that felt misplaced for a light promotional segment. Her expression was tight, focused, almost confrontational, as if she was preparing for something far more serious than a movie discussion. As the show returned from commercial, Whoopi opened with her usual calm authority, welcoming viewers back and introducing Mark, while hinting that the conversation might go beyond just the film. Mark smiled politely, nodding as he thanked the hosts, clearly expecting a respectful exchange. Then Joy leaned forward, her pen tapping sharply against her cards, cutting through the pleasant tone like a blade. "Mark, before we talk about the movie, there's something people have been talking about and I think it needs to be addressed," she said, her voice deliberate and loaded. The shift in energy was instant and impossible to ignore. Mark's smile faded just slightly as he turned toward her, sensing the ground beneath him had suddenly changed. "Okay, what's that?" he asked cautiously. "Your past," Joy said bluntly, not easing into it for a second. "You've built this image of being reformed, of turning your life around, but let's be honest about who you really were back then." The panel stiffened immediately. This wasn't part of the pre-interview discussion, and everyone at the table knew it. Sarah shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable, while Whoopi's expression tightened with concern. Mark inhaled slowly, folding his hands together as he kept his voice steady. "Joy, I've never hidden from my past. I've been open about my mistakes and spent decades trying to make things right and be better." "Make things right?" Joy shot back, her voice rising just enough to sting. "You committed hate crimes, Mark, and now you're sitting here in a tailored suit, making millions, being celebrated as a role model. Don't you think something about that is deeply wrong?" The studio went silent, except for the low hum of the cameras. You could feel the tension ripple through the room as Mark's jaw tightened, the restraint on his face starting to crack. "I was charged with assault, Joy, not hate crimes," Mark said carefully. "But I won't pretend what I did wasn't wrong. It was. I was young, reckless, and I've spent my adult life trying to atone for that." Joy wasn't interested in restraint. She flipped another card with almost theatrical precision and fired back, pointing out his age at the time, repeating details with surgical force, framing his actions as calculated hatred rather than reckless youth. The audience sat, frozen. Sensing this was spiraling fast. Whoopi tried to interject, hoping to slow things down, but Joy cut her off mid-sentence, clearly determined to press forward. "I'm tired of watching people like you get rehabilitated by Hollywood," Joy declared. "The victims don't get to forget. Why should you?" Mark's face flushed red as his hands clenched on the table. His voice sharpened as he pushed back, naming his victim, and stating clearly that they had spoken, that forgiveness had been given, that healing had happened. Joy scoffed instantly, her sarcasm biting. She questioned his motives, implied convenience, and suggested forgiveness was bought rather than earned. That was the moment the air changed completely. Mark leaned forward, his chair scraping loudly across the floor as his voice finally rose. "Are you seriously accusing me of paying someone off on live television? You know that's not true." Joy didn't retreat. She smirked, leaning into the chaos she had created. She framed his entire career as proof of a system, rewarding violence, pushing harder as his composure visibly cracked. Mark fired back, his Boston accent sharpening with emotion as he described his upbringing, his broken home, the chaos of his childhood, and the reality of growing up without safety or stability. Joy dismissed it instantly, mocking the explanation and reframing it as an excuse, escalating the tension even further as the rest of the panel sat powerless to intervene. The conversation was no longer an interview, it was a collision, raw and unfiltered, barreling towards something no one could stop anymore. Joy didn't let the moment breathe for even a second. She leaned forward again, eyes locked on Mark, her voice sharpened with accusation as she questioned whether hardship justified violence at all. "So your answer to struggling was to hurt innocent people," she pressed, each word landing heavier than the last. Mark snapped back instantly, slamming his hand against the table so hard the sound echoed across the studio. The hosts jumped, the audience flinched, and the tension exploded into something raw and uncontrollable. "That's not a defense, it's context," he shot back, his voice shaking with restrained fury. "And there's a difference, whether you're willing to understand it or not." Joy seized on the outburst, her eyes flashing as if she had just proven her point. She accused him of revealing his true nature, suggesting that even now, decades later, the violence was still there under the surface. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Mark froze for a split second, breathing hard, then laughed bitterly. "You're twisting this because it fits your narrative," he fired back. "You want a villain, so you're determined to keep me one, no matter what I've done since." Whoopi tried again to slow the crash, urging everyone to step back, to lower the temperature. But Mark cut in, calmly, too calmly, saying, "No, let her finish. This is what she wanted." The room went still. Joy doubled down, reading from her notes as if presenting a case in court. She recited charges, police language and allegations, reframing them in the harshest possible light. Each sentence felt less like a question and more like a verdict. Mark laughed again, this time hollow and exhausted. He called out the phrasing, challenged the labels, and accused Joy of turning legal facts into television theatre. "You're not looking for truth," he said sharply. "You're looking for spectacle." Joy shot back without hesitation, demanding to know why he thought his punishment was enough. She repeated the sentence length, emphasizing it again and again, as if repetition alone could erase everything he'd done since. "What do you want from me?" Mark finally demanded, his voice rising again. "You want me erased? You want my career gone? You want me punished forever?" His frustration spilled out, raw and unfiltered. Joy answered coldly, saying she wanted honesty, not a redemption narrative. She accused him of benefiting from fame, while others would have been destroyed for the same actions. That was when Mark stood up again, the movement sudden enough to draw security closer to the edge of the set. He didn't shout. He spoke clearly, deliberately, admitting he had received opportunities others hadn't, but insisting they weren't handed to him freely. "I worked for everything after that," he said firmly, "and I've spent decades trying to give back, not hide." His voice boomed through the studio, rattling the silence. Joy mocked the effort, dismissing charity and mentorship as meaningless gestures compared to lasting harm. Her words were blunt, unsoftened, and intentionally cutting. Mark roared back, that he had never claimed to be a saint. "I'm not asking for praise," he shouted. "I'm asking whether you believe people can change at all," Joy answered without hesitation. "Actions have consequences," she said, "and wealth shouldn't shield anyone from them." The statement landed like a challenge. Mark paced behind his chair, running his hands through his hair, visibly unraveling. He spoke about carrying the weight of his past every single day, about never escaping it, no matter how much time passed. "Good," Joy replied flatly. "You should carry it." The cruelty of the moment stunned the room. That stopped Mark cold. He turned slowly, staring directly at her, his face flushed, but his voice steady. He admitted guilt openly, but warned there was a difference between accountability and destruction. Joy crossed her arms, unmoved, asking whether his story was redemption, or just luck dressed up as growth. Mark shook his head, accusing her of walking into the interview with a verdict already decided. He said she didn't want conversation, she wanted a public execution for applause. Joy bristled, insisting she was holding him accountable. Mark fired back instantly, asking who appointed her judge and jury of his life. The exchange spiraled faster, voices overlapping, tension snapping like a wire pulled too tight. The audience sat frozen, aware they were witnessing something that had gone far beyond television drama. Mark finally dropped back into his chair, leg bouncing uncontrollably as he accused Joy of making it personal. She denied it fiercely, claiming it was about principle, not him. He laughed harshly, saying responsibility wasn't erased by success, and that guilt didn't disappear with money. Every word dripped with exhaustion and anger. Sarah finally tried to redirect the chaos, asking about charity and outreach, but Joy shut it down immediately, demanding answers instead of deflections. Mark snapped back, accusing her of ignoring everything he had done to make things right. Joy responded bluntly, nothing would ever be enough. The studio plunged into silence again as Mark stared at her, visibly shaken, the weight of her words sinking in as cameras captured every second. The silence dragged on, thick and suffocating, as Mark stared across the table, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. His face drained of colour, then flushed again, emotions crashing into each other faster than he could control them. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling, but every word landed with brutal weight. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Joy," he said slowly, locking eyes with her. "I know I'm not perfect, and I've never pretended otherwise." The studio felt like it stopped breathing. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Mark raised his hand, stopping her cold. "No, you've talked enough," he continued, his voice growing steadier. "You sit there, tearing people down on television and call it morality, and somehow you think that makes you righteous." Joy stiffened, her expression hardening as murmurs rippled through the audience. She accused him of deflection, of trying to flip the narrative when she was only holding him accountable. Mark shook his head slowly, a bitter smile crossing his face. "Accountability isn't humiliation," he shot back. "Accountability is asking questions and actually listening to the answers, not twisting everything to fit your agenda." The tension snapped again as Joy leaned forward, accusing him of using forgiveness as a shield. She questioned whether meeting his victim erased the damage, whether a single act of forgiveness outweighed years of harm. Mark's voice exploded again, louder than before, echoing through the studio. He insisted there were no cameras, no headlines, no publicists when that meeting happened. "It wasn't a show," he shouted. "It was two human beings trying to live with something terrible." Joy dismissed it instantly, arguing that one victim's forgiveness didn't erase the pain felt by others. She broadened the accusation, framing his past as part of a larger harm that could never be undone. Mark laughed again, but this time it was exhausted, hollow, almost broken. "You're acting like I was running some campaign of terror," he said incredulously. "I was a messed up kid who made horrible choices, not a cartoon villain you can keep recycling for ratings." Joy fired back, without missing a beat, labeling racially motivated violence as unforgivable, no matter the age, no matter the time past. Her voice was cold, clinical, relentless. Something shifted in Mark then. His anger faded into something quieter, more unsettling. He nodded slowly and said, "You're right. What I did was wrong, inexcusable, ignorant, and ugly." The admission stunned the room. For a moment, Joy looked almost satisfied, as if she had finally forced the confession she wanted. But Mark didn't stop there. "You want honesty?" he continued, his voice sharpening again. "Here, it is. You've shown more hatred in the last 20 minutes than I've shown in the last 20 years. The words hit like a slap. Joy's face flushed deep red, shock flashing across her expression for the first time all interview. She snapped back angrily, accusing him of comparing words to violence. "No," Mark replied firmly. "I'm comparing intent. You're enjoying this. You're enjoying trying to destroy someone on live television." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Joy stood up abruptly, matching his posture again. Her voice shook with fury as she accused him of running from responsibility. Mark didn't back down. "I've been living with responsibility for 30 years, he said sharply. "Every headline, every reminder, every night when I can't sleep." His voice cracked just slightly. The clash escalated fast, both of them standing now, neither willing to yield an inch. Security edged closer, eyes locked on the stage, ready for anything. Joy accused him of believing growth erased consequences. Mark fired back that consequences didn't require lifelong public execution. Whoopi finally tried to force a break, her voice strained with urgency, but both Mark and Joy spoke over her at the same time, refusing to disengage. "You want to know what really bothers me?" Mark continued, his voice rising to a near shout. "It's not my past. It's that you're enjoying this. You're feeding on it." Joy shouted back that actions have consequences, her voice cracking as she spoke over him. "And some people deserve to be torn down." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Mark stared at her for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I deserve to be destroyed." The room froze. "But you know what I don't deserve," he continued, his voice suddenly sharp again. "I don't deserve to be judged by someone acting like a schoolyard bully while hiding behind a studio desk." He turned and began walking toward the edge of the set, clearly done. Gasps rippled through the audience as the reality of what was happening set in. Joy called after him, accusing him of running away, her voice suddenly desperate as control slipped from her grasp. Mark stopped, turned back, and delivered his final words with calm precision that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "I'm not running from my past," he said clearly. "I'm walking away from what you're doing right now." The distinction hit hard. Security moved in closer as Mark reached for his microphone. The other hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Joy made one last attempt to reclaim authority, accusing him of proving her point by leaving. The accusation rang hollow in the stunned studio. Mark unclipped his microphone slowly and placed it on the table. "People like me," he said quietly. "People who made mistakes and tried to change. Heaven forbid we acknowledge growth instead of pretending moral superiority is the same as justice." With that, he walked off the set, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and a silence so loud it felt unbearable. The cameras lingered just a few seconds longer, capturing Joy standing motionless, her expression tight as realization settled in. The moment didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure. What was meant to be a takedown had turned into something else entirely. A public confrontation about redemption, punishment, and whether society actually believes people can change or just enjoys watching them be torn apart. Mark Wahlberg didn't just walk off the show, he walked away, having forced an uncomfortable question into the open. Are we holding people accountable, or are we just addicted to public destruction? And that question is exactly why this moment still sparks debate long after the cameras stopped rolling.